I'm noticing a shift. And it's kind of paradoxical to think that just by being, things change. And by my ability to cultivate loving kindness and compassion for myself, I'm able to extend that to anyone and everyone, which is changing my relationship to the world. I don't quite understand what's happening. I just realize now that there's a lot of space that I don't have any grasp of and cannot, because it cannot be contained.
That's great. The great mystery is always a mystery. We have to be a little careful about, this does not necessarily apply to you, but I'm thinking about another principle here. We have to be a little careful about feelings that we're making progress or things are going in the right direction. Because usually, if things are agreeing with our ideas about how they should be, we say, oh yes, 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 and give it a big check mark. If they aren't going according to our ideas, then we say, oh, bad, 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 problems, problems, problems. And the real issue is not how things are going, but our ideas about them. So to really let go of those ideas and be willing to be present and respond is part of this practice. Other comments, Ron?
So, Zazen is not a self-improvement exercise, as you often remind us.
Partly it is. Partly it's a self-improvement exercise.
But the fruit of sitting may be experienced. Is that the karma which you speak?
Sometimes the fruits are apparent, and sometimes they're not apparent. And sometimes they're, the result of a seed grows years later, and sometimes it grows in a very near time. So sometimes it's really apparent, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's a self-improvement project. It's great to see things improve. Sometimes we don't see that. Sometimes it's hidden. So the reason I keep saying Zazen is not a self-improvement project is because if we're doing, especially when we're doing Sesshin, and we're trying to do really intense Zazen, if there's the slightest bit of, I don't like this, I want that. I don't like this, I want that, I want that, I want that. If I'm just a little bit better than this, that dissatisfaction that's right here at the core creates a gap. So when we say it's not a self-improvement project, we really are saying just completely be willing to be present with your own skin the way it is. On the other hand, if we obey the precepts, if we are really practicing compassion, our character changes. People like us more. So on one hand, it is a self-improvement project in terms of our skill level pie.
I don't understand why enlightened beings are exempt from karma.
Well, there's a very interesting koan, the second koan of the Mumon koan, is Shakajo's Fox, and it's really about that particular point. And I think it's really worth investigating what is an enlightened being, what is a being, what is karma, and what is past, present, and future. And one of the things that it really says, one of the nubs of that, the verbal part of that particular koan is the law of cause and effect cannot be put aside. So, next. Well, the law of cause and effect cannot be put aside, and yet there is a way of being free within our own circumstances. Alan?
Is karma deterministic?
It's the kind of thing we can't say it's not deterministic, because obviously the past affects the present. On the other hand, we can't say it is deterministic because at this moment, you can decide to wiggle your ears or wiggle your fingers. You have freedom. So you can't say that it exactly is, you can't say it exactly isn't. But there is certainly, you can look at it in different ways, different times. Determinism, thinking that if we just knew all the causal factors of the universe, we would know the future. That's not Buddhism. That's just an archaic 19th century mechanical way of thinking. On the other hand,
how do we? I'm just thinking about all those years that I was smoking pot and drinking and carousing and all of that. How did I change? I mean, if I was creating all this kind of cause and effect, doing all of those things that I could certainly see the results of that, my life spiraled down. How does change happen?
We have to just assume that all of those things you were doing, all that spiraling down, and all that recovery led to this wonderful person we've got right here. Nothing is left out. And we often sometimes think about our past, we think, okay, if I could just cut out those 3 years and get rid of them, all would be well. But those 3 terrible years are really part of the wisdom and the juice that we have right now. So nothing is left out. Ms. Keisha.
I think part of what I was hearing and what Alan was asking is, if negative action leads to negative effect, then how, if he was putting negative action out there, then did change happen with a positive effect?
Okay, how would you answer that?
I don't know, that's why I asked you.
Always when you're asking questions, you always know the answer.
So Alan, how would you respond to that? You know, the thing that Keisha reframed your question, I think, saying, well, if I have all these difficult things, how do they transform into something that is positive and worthwhile?
That's the mystery.
It is part of the
That's the mystery. I mean, why does somebody going down the same path I was going down keep going down that path?
Maybe they need deeper wisdom.
And why did I not?
See, every moment, I mean, it's how we evaluate each thing, each moment. So it may be that somebody who goes right down to the bottom who's worse than you are, in some way, that is the force. Just like the force that you had to impel you to live a good life, the force that you had to impel you to clean up your act, the force that you had to impel you to find the wisdom that you had in your own heart, the force that impelled you to be able to help other people, was that dark time. If you hadn't gone through that, you probably would have been a much more superficial person. So we have to look, other people have that same potential. And that's one of the things that we have to talk about with karma, is we have to look at everybody thinking, okay, there are really, really, really hard, terrible, terrible, terrible times, and nobody is without the potential for awakening. And sometimes, we have to look beyond this life if we see somebody who's really destroyed. At the same time, the seeds of awakening are always present. So nobody, we have to look at that with our own life. Nothing is wasted in our life. Nothing is wasted, despite how it feels some days. Okay, Barry, you have a question?
Oh, I was wondering, there's karma about ourselves, but is there ever a kind of a national karma? Like, I'm thinking about British Petroleum, and it used to be Iranian oil, and what we did to Muhammad Mossadegh.
Yeah, I think there is a kind of a group karma, a group individual karma, or a group karma of all the individuals get together. I mean, there's a kind of different states of mind that all seem to coagulate. One last comment.
So what we're talking about here is that so-called dark time. Is that the social way of looking at it, rather than that there was seeds being planted even then?
We have to look at it both ways. We can't be Pollyannish about this. We can't be Pollyannish and think, oh, good, those nice drug dealers, they're on their way to becoming Buddhas. I mean, we have to respond appropriately to each circumstance. I mean, if we see something that's really unhealthy and evil, we have to respond to it appropriately. And at the same time, we have to be able to see the wholeness of things. So that's part of what insight is about. That if we only see the superficial part, we only see the surface, we're only responding to what we regard as unhealthy, as evil, and we're not seeing the inherent emptiness, the inherent wholeness, the inherent oneness of all things. And we're not seeing that second part, that other level that permeates everything. Then our response is very reactive, and we burn out very quickly. So it is, and that's part of why we practice, is to really clearly see that the relative and the absolute are not two different things. But that's just a word. We have to actually have the experience. Ron, one last thing. And then...
With those axes, then you're saying karma works, of course, across the relative horizontal as well as right through the vertical.
No, I don't know how it works. It's just a big We've got to get down to that. It's all a bunch of words. Thank you all very much.